Welcome back to another episode of Sports Avenue. I'm your host, Jimmy Simonis, and today I have another guest that's going to be talking about some of his most interesting experiences in sports. He even went to the Super Bowl, an all-expenses-paid trip to a spectacle that not many people get to see in their lifetime. I would like to welcome Carson Sweezy. Carson, how you doing, man?
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm doing great.
And you're more than welcome to join. But let me tell you, when we were talking about this before the show, you told me before when we first met that you got an all-expenses-paid trip to the Super Bowl last year. And I want you to talk about that because not many people get to say they went to the Super Bowl, but an all-expenses-paid, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy experience. So I'll set the stage a little bit. Chime in if you want to need clarification or anything. But so I stopped watching football for a couple of years, and there's some reasons behind that. But growing up, I've watched football since I was 4. It's been my sport. I played it since I was 9. I played it throughout high school. So football has always been my thing, and I kind of stopped watching when I went off to college, and then found myself really sick and ill. So I picked it back up as just this way to really, like, it was a social expression for me of some way to connect with something outside of my house since I was so ill and wasn't really able to leave for a while. So I started watching religiously again and somehow had Sunday ticket through a family member. So I was watching like every single game on Sundays, not to mention Mondays and Thursdays and Saturdays. Anyway, towards the playoffs, Bumble puts out this contest to win all expenses paid trip to the Super Bowl. So I submitted to their questions. They had 2 questions. It was an essay contest. And they liked what I wrote in response to those 2 questions. So they sent me and a friend, I took my brother. They paid for our plane tickets. They paid for the hotel. They gave us a Visa gift card for $500 and was just spending money and do whatever you want with this. And then obviously the tickets were paid for. So, yeah, crazy experience. It was the Super Bowl against Super Bowl 53, Patriots and Rams. So I know from the home viewers, it wasn't the most exciting, but being at the Super Bowl was absolutely insane. I don't think it would have mattered much if it was a shootout or not. So yeah, crazy experience.
And honestly, I'm going to be one of those people. I personally love the game because I love those defensive battles. And there was a lot more strategy behind it than just guys just scoring touchdowns left and right, and that's why I thought it was so unique. And like I can only imagine what that atmosphere was like in the brand new Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. So I mean, like your experience was probably it's so rare, and I think it's awesome that you wanted to come onto the show and talk about that because it is such a unique story.
Yeah, the experience was crazy. You're right, inside Mercedes-Benz, and the fact that they were doing their, they have the pretty low concessions is kind of what they're known for. And they even had that during the Super Bowl. So beers were like $3, hot dogs were like a couple bucks, water bottles were $1 for big water bottles. So it was cool to see that they were the stadium was staying true to what they do during the season and during other events. They were doing that for the biggest sporting event in the world, which was cool from that perspective. But the stadium was amazing. They opened up the sky for the flyover, and that was insane. The screen was insane. It's like this arena thing. It feels like you're in Hunger Games or something. It's just like this epic screen that's going all around this the stadium, and the whole week leading up to it was insane too. Just events all over the city. You'd see famous Hall of Fame players and from all different generations just walking around town all week long. Just everyone's kind of in town for this huge party is what it is.
I am curious though, what were those questions that you had to answer in that essay?
Yeah, so all right, so it's 2 questions. The first one was why do you want to go to the biggest sporting event of the year? And the second was, it was Bumble, right? So dating app. The second was, what's your go-to first move on a date?
That's got to be, well, I think the first question's pretty self-explanatory if you're a sports fan. The second one, you might have to be a little bit more creative on that end.
Yeah, well, for the first one too, I kind of tried to leave the hype of the game behind, and I was just honest with what I was feeling at the time with that first answer too. So I wrote about how, I'd been really sick and was bedridden for, at that time it was like 6 months. I'm doing better now, so I'm good now. But at the time I'd been bedridden for like 6 months and wasn't really able to eat or move or do anything, couldn't exercise. So, um, yeah, I wrote about that and like how sports reintroduced themselves into my lives and became this again, like this connection to the outside world, something I could look forward to, and something I could talk about with people, and something that kind of took my mind off things. And it's a game after all. It's not like, it's serious when they're fans, but at the same time, compared to all the other things going on in the world and even our own lives at times, it's this fun kind of release, right? So that's what I wrote about for the first one. The second one, I honestly don't know what I wrote. I think I wrote like my pickup line or something, which isn't really a pickup line. It's just an opening question, something about if you were a food, what would you be? I think that was what it was. But yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt pretty good about it when I submitted the essay. Um, it just felt really genuine and real to me because it was telling my story. I wasn't really trying to put any fluff into it, and I was still surprised when I got the email back. But when I submitted it, I was like, all right, this might have a chance of winning.
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of bringing this all back in together, what makes you a fan of sports? What makes you passionate about sports?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think I've reflected on that some recently, and one of the things I think that stands out to me now as an adult is that sports are to some extent the fullest expression of what humans are capable of in a physical sense, but also in a collaborative sense from a team, from leadership standpoint. So it's this kind of great um, microscope, or you can put a microscope on it and see all these reasons why humans are so great at certain things, right? It's like the fullest extent of all these things, from athleticism to expression to leadership to team building. And that's amazing to watch that on any given night with any number of sports, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you said you were bedridden, and you said that kind of drew you away from sports because obviously your health becomes first priority. How did you kind of get your mentality back into loving sports again? Was it kind of something that you just jumped right back into, or was something you kind of had to pace yourself and gradually get back into it? Like, I guess, how did you keep yourself, or how did you get yourself back into what you loved?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was getting sick that got me back into it. So I stopped watching initially from um, I was just busy, honestly. It was before I got sick. I was selling real estate in the DC area and going to college at the same time. I just didn't really have time to watch sports. But then when I got sick and put everything on hold, I stopped working, and um, I really just needed to relax too. Like the disease, a lot of it was brought on by stress and stuff, and stress made it worse. So I needed something to kind of relax and just like enjoy, and something, quite frankly, that I had no control over. And sports is, as fans, we like to think sometimes we have a lot of control over it when we're at the games, maybe. But when you're on your couch, you're just enjoying it, and it also was like a different experience. Like whereas before, I would stress out a lot. I mentioned that I'm a Cowboys fan, and in my lifetime, I've never seen them do anything. So there's a lot of heartbreak that goes into watching your team and rooting and then them losing. But this second time around, or like my rejuvenation of sports watching came with total de-stressor and just like enjoying it, and knowing that it's out of my control, and just having faith in my team. And um, I've seen my Capitals win, and I've seen my Nationals win since that happened. So I don't know. Maybe it's working for my teams too. Just me not stressing out about them is working out so far.
Yeah, and I understand being a Cleveland fan because I'm from the Cleveland area, so I know those struggles, man. I hope it gets better, but yeah, I know that pain.
Yeah.
But yeah, you said you've seen the Capitals win, and you've seen the Nationals, like you've seen these teams play live when they're on these championship runs. Explain those experiences, because not, again, like I've said before, not many people get to experience that in a relatively little amount of time. Like you said, the Nationals just won, the Capitals just won a couple years ago. I mean, you've experienced a lot of this in a short amount of time. So what has it been like trying to take it all in?
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, in my lifetime, DC has never been known as a sports town, especially with the Redskins. It's just like Redskins fans are so down on them too. Um, but yeah, it's incredible to see the town grab onto something other than politics. I think everyone wants there to be something to grab onto other than politics in this area, because that's what kind of drives the ship. But when the Nationals, that's top of mind because that was like a week ago or a couple, whatever it was recently. Um, just walking out and seeing everyone wearing Nats gear and driving downtown for the game, seeing how many people were down there, even for the away games. Like I was down there when we played in Houston for Game 7, and it was completely packed. There were thousands of people there, thousands of policemen, and it's hard to it's really hard to describe the experience of it. It's like everyone's on the same page. Everyone's cheering for the same cause. More so than just a regular season game. It's the entire town, the entire city is behind it. It's people that never have watched baseball in their lives now understanding what baseball is and trying to get behind it. It's the craziest experience that isn't really otherwise captured in sports, other than when your team's in the championship.
Right. And you brought up politics, so and I just kind of got the question in my head. How do sports and politics go together in Washington D.C.? Because both of them are, let's just say, kind of they're tough. I guess if you're as like a fan or a person of interest, that you have to put a lot of energy and time into it. So I guess how does the city deal with taking the capital of politics in America and having numerous sports teams all in the same area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure there's people a lot smarter than me that have written about this for the Post. But the example that I'm thinking of is when I was a little kid going to Wizards games. We used to have season tickets, and you'd see senators and secretaries just chilling there with their Blackberries back then, reading stuff. And I think that's a really close interweaving. Is a lot of the politicians are at the games constantly. But in terms of like how the teams manage the like actual politics and the players managing it, I think that can be interesting too. The World Series example of at Game 5 in DC, fans booed Trump when he came out and they announced him, and a lot of the Nats fans started chanting "Let him lock him up." But then you see the Nats celebrating at the White House, and Suzuki's wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat. And that got controversy. So I think it's really difficult for athletes, especially, to try to navigate that, because they're playing games at the end of the day, but they're people, they have opinions, and the teams, the owners, like, where do they stand on that too? So I think it's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm, have much of an opinion on how it affects DC, but you definitely notice it, again, just by seeing the politicians at the games, at the Nats games, at the Wizards games, at the Caps games. They're always around.
All right, all right. So Carson, growing up, you said you played from 8 years old to 18 years old playing football. What was that experience like? Because again, I'm one of those kids that played when they were 7 years old until I quit sophomore year, so I played about 9, 10 years. But yeah, what was your experience like playing and you played for a good perennial powerhouse program in Virginia. So talk about a program that you played for.
Yeah, so so I played for Westwood High School in Virginia. They've won 4 state titles in 15 or 20 years or so since they've been around. The funny thing is I was actually part of the worst ever football team at that high school, which is funny because I think we were 20-12 over my 3 years of varsity. So not that bad, but for Westfield standards, that's like awful. They're used to going undefeated or maybe one loss throughout the year. And it's a crazy program. I think we've only had 3 NFL players, and we rarely have D1 players. So it shows you how good the coaches are with taking very average talent and turning them into winning teams every single year in and year out. We've won 5 titles now, because we've won 3 of the last 4. And that shows you, again, like, none of those kids in the last 4 years have gone D1, but the coaches are incredible. They're really good at not only teaching technique, but teaching leadership skills and um, teamwork and working together and communication too. I think that's a huge thing they teach is communicating, not only during the plays with you guys next to you and your quarterback and everything, but communicating during practice or with the coach with what you're seeing or what you need help with, or in the film room with what you're trying to understand, or even in the classroom, helping you communicate better with your teachers.
Yeah, and what was the biggest takeaway from you after you graduated that you kind of attribute to the football program?
Yeah, I think work ethic is kind of the cliche, but that's just drilled into you day in and day out. And it's year round. It's a year round sport. Football is not something where you're only doing it during the season. We're lifting weights and running in January all the way to August when the season, or July really, when the season starts. So it's hard to not take that away. And I think work ethic, but not in just working so hard at everything, but like working hard for a purpose and having passion for that purpose. And I think that's what the best work ethic has, is it's tied to something greater than just yourself.
And I'm going to go on the assumption that football is your favorite sport.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be really easy to say baseball right now because I've gotten really dialed into it. But cumulatively throughout my life, I would say football is, yeah, without any close competitors, my favorite sport.
All right, who would you say is your best favorite, or who's your favorite NFL player of all time?
Of all time, well, that's a great question. I'd have to say Jason Witten. He
Really?
leaves, yeah, he leaves it all out there. Total team player. You can tell he's a leader, but he's not all rah rah. He knows what to say at the right times when he's on the field. Yeah, and just he's a beast on the field. I mean, look at him. Look at him now. Did you see him on against the Giants? He had 10 catches or something. So yeah, great player.
Man, because I'm thinking like Cowboys fan, he's probably gonna go like Dion, Evan Smith, Michael Irvin. I'm thinking one of those cats. And next thing you know, oh, Jason Witten. I'm like, but I do get that because I do respect Jason Witten as a player because, I mean, like you said, he is a good leader in on a football team that kind of needed leadership when he was there. He was kind of the old, like he was pretty much the dad or the grandpa of the football team, kind of trying to bring everyone to flow with Zeke, Dak, Amari, or not Amari, kind of bringing these young guys along. So I respect that choice. It's not a common one, but I respect it.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, ask me in a couple of years. It might be Leighton Vander Esch. We'll see how his
Ooh,
trajectory goes.
yeah, him and Jalen Smith, man, those two are good.
It's a lethal combo. Yeah, it's really exciting to see, especially as a Cowboy. You can probably relate to this. You're a Browns fan. You said Cleveland, but you're a Browns football fan too.
Yeah.
Okay. Just like there's something about when your defense is really bad that's like way worse than, in my opinion, having a mediocre offense, because that's the stuff that is really just like heart wrenching when your defensive backs are getting, just like completely blitzed on, or when your linebackers can't make tackles or whatever it is. In my opinion, watching a terrible defense is so hard when it's your team. And I'm so happy that the Cowboys finally have a defense that can win them games.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, in my opinion, Cowboys have one of the best front sevens in the football league or in the NFL. I do think the secondary needs a little bit more help to be like an elite group. But like I said, I think they have one of the best front sevens overall, for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. And that, in some ways makes up for their secondary not being as great. Not that they can't use help, but in the past we haven't had a good front seven or a good secondary. And yeah, they just get blown up. But it really helps having a pass rush and being able to shut down the run. Helps with the passing game. And, it'd be nice to pick up someone, but we'll see. We'll see what happens later on in the season. I think trying to find someone. I know they were trying to make a trade during the trade deadline, and that didn't work out. But yeah, I have high hopes for our defense being able to shut teams down.
I was just going to say, because if you look at the 49ers, their back four aren't necessarily the best. I mean, they're kind of led by Richard Sherman, who he's already past his 30s, and for corners, that's pretty much like your father time is running out for you. But they have one of the best defenses because their pass rush and their rushing defense is one of the best in the league.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, Bosa is
He's been
coming
an
out
animal.
and making the campaign for Rookie of the Year, I guess. Probably Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Also, I wanted to ask you, what has it been like? Because with the Nationals, they were not. Or we're moving on to baseball, but moving on to the Nationals, they were not good since they've been in DC. Then they got Bryce Harper, they got Strasburg, they started accumulating some younger talent. Then when they had Harper and all this talented team, they couldn't get it done in the playoffs. Then Bryce Harper leaves, then they win the World Series. I guess what was like that struggle trying to watch that baseball team grow? Because I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
it's
it's
like I remember playing MLB The Show, then I see the Nationals are like the 30th ranked team in every category, and it's like it's bad, man, it's bad.
yeah, they've it's definitely a story that will be written about for a while because it's been incredible watching them this year and yeah, with all the playoff struggles over the years 2012, 15, 16, 17, just like not everyone's heartbroken on them and um, when they moved here too, like they weren't really the team. I grew up going to Orioles games, even though I live in Virginia. The closest team was the Orioles, so they had to fight that too. They had to fight the market. They weren't just like automatically everyone's team. And I think getting a new stadium helped, and uh, just a lot of the things they've done, bringing in players and stuff, has helped build up their fan base. But I think they have one of the best fan bases in baseball. And during those World Series parades and going to all the games and stuff, I met some really old school fans that I was so happy for because they've been watching since before the team even came here. Like they were at the launch party at Union Station when they announced the name of the teams. I met this one guy who was at that party. Um, Went to opening day at RFK Stadium, and has just been a fan since then, since 2004, before they even came here. So I really felt for them. But for me, it's funny because I haven't been like a huge baseball fan my whole life. I've played my whole life. I played since T-ball, but um, I watched them here and there, and like definitely went to games my whole life, and kept up with the standings and all that. But it wasn't really until last season that I started watching on TV. And I feel like I've gotten the best ROI of any investment I've ever made because I watched last year, up until the playoff, into the playoff race, and they were kicked out of the playoff race in August last year. And then this season picked up back, kind of where I left off, like watching a lot. But I watched every game, almost every game from about June on. So I think I probably watched 130 plus games every single night. Like not just having it on the background, but like let's sit down and watch the entire game. And when I started watching, they were awful. And then they were awful in their record, but they were coming out of their slump, and you could tell there was something special about them. They just had a lot of fight, and even games that they lost, they fought till the end. And there was something special about watching them the whole season. And to watch them, from the wild card game to game 5 of the NLDS after losing, going down 2-1 against the Dodgers, sweeping the Cards, and then, yeah, the crazy finish in the World Series is just, yeah, storybook season, really. And I know they made a lot of new fans. And like I said, I felt like it was the best ROI just from my time, like watching them religiously every single night all season. And they won the World Series that year, and they made up for a lot of heartbreak in the playoffs in years past.
Yeah, and who is your favorite Nationals player?
This one might be a little shocking too. Not many people say, but Victor Robles is my favorite
I respect
center
that.
fielder.
I respect that. He is. He has a lot of talent to develop. But I think he's gonna be a really good center fielder in the league.
He's great on defense. He does have some development to go. And even this season, he started off kind of not judging his balls right, and he's figured that out and did a great defensive job in the playoffs. And his batting, I know it didn't really show up in the World Series, so a lot of people watching them for the first time during that series might not see him as a great hitter, but it's really consistent. He's really good at getting on base. He was one of the top hit by pitch guys in the league this year, so he knows how to get on. He had quite a few walks too, and he's just so energetic in the batting box. This really didn't show up in the World Series that much, but anytime a close is anywhere near him, it's the way that he kind of leans in, like he's just kind of close to the He doesn't look like he's close if you look at his feet, but by the time the pitch gets there, his body is pretty close to the strike zone, and he's constantly running out of the way of pitches and doing his dancing and trying to get out of the way. And it's just like so energetic. He has so much energy in the batting box, and on defense, he's a gem to watch. Makes a lot of good catches.
So I have to ask you this now because with Bryce Harper heading to Philadelphia last year, what side were you on? Were you on him leaving, or did you want him to stay?
I can't say I wanted him to stay. I guess I did kind of want him to stay, but I also felt that our GM Rizzo knew what he was doing if he's going to let Bryce Harper go, even though he didn't have much of a choice. But that's just kind of how I was feeling, and I knew he had some good talent. Soto kind of made a spark last year, and Rendon's obviously a beast, and we have some good bats. And in hindsight, it's a great decision. I'm not going to say we won because he left, but I do think he as an individual, and this isn't even his choice, but he's a superstar. He gets a lot of hype put on him, and the Nationals roster this year didn't really have that type of at least position player who had seen superstardom. And so there really weren't any expectations on him. And I think in the clubhouse that says a lot because you don't have the one guy that's always getting interviewed. Now it's really anyone's game. Whoever makes, crazy stuff happen that night is going to get interviewed after the game. And I think that takes a lot of pressure out of every at bat. And, again, in hindsight and in my opinion, that allowed them to be such a great team.
And I was going to say as well, to add on to what you were saying, when Juan Soto came up and he was producing like he did, I'm like, let Harper walk because Soto was a young, super talented prospect, not like on the level of Bryce Harper, but he had a future in the league as a star. And this year he showed it. And the World Series, I think, was just kind of like Soto's like mark of saying he's going to be a star in the league, doing his little shuffle and crotch grab and he did good. Like he produced the entire season pretty much, And I thought, I'm like, you can just see it. He's got that like confidence about him that he is going to be a good player in this league. And I'm kind of curious to see how he develops.
Yeah, it should be really interesting to watch. Definitely has some defense he can work on, but he'll improve with that stuff and being more consistent and doing what he needs to do at bat. I think it's a great point. They kind of gambled on it, but not really. They knew what they were doing. On the outside, it might look like a gamble, letting go of a power hitter like Harper. But Juan Soto's proven to be great so far, and he's melding well with the team. We have a lot of good players this year.
So now you have to answer another tough question. So you have Anthony Rendon that's gonna get a big payday. Steven Strasburg just opted out. What do you do?
Yeah.
Because, they're sitting there thinking, well, Anthony Rendon just had one of his career years. Granted, he's been consistently good, but this year he was kind of like one of the guys that led the pack for the Nationals. And Strasburg, he was amazing in the postseason. I don't know if the Nationals win without him. So, these two are expecting big paydays. You just paid Corbin, kind of most of the money that Harper would have gotten towards his big contract. And you have young talent in your system with Trey Turner, Robles, Soto. You got a lot to maneuver in this offseason to keep yourself in the contenders picture.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be a challenge. Especially between Rendon and Strasburg. Like if they have to decide between one of them who they're gonna max out on or who they're gonna try to really, really focus on, that's gonna be an incredibly tough decision. Strasburg obviously showed up in the playoffs. He showed up all season too. He had a great season. I think he won his last 18 games or something like that in the regular season. He had an 18-game winning streak at some point. I don't know if he finished that out, but Rendon in the regular season was just absolutely unreal. He had led the league in doubles. His nickname around here is Tony Two Bags. Just a super consistent hitter, but not just consistent, but does what the team needs. So he's not going to swing for the fences just because they're down a run late in the innings. He's going to do what he needs to do, and sometimes that's getting on with a walk. Sometimes that's hitting a double. sometimes that's swinging for the fences and trying to, pop a tater. But he's, I think, that confidence too, and you can see how calm he is at the plate. I think that works really well in the clubhouse too. So yeah, whatever decisions they need to make this year, I think they're going to come down to not only production on the field, but what that chemistry is like in the clubhouse. And maybe they're looking at how Strasburg could help Corbin up his game, or whatever it is. Like, it's going to be more than just the production on the field that they're going to have to figure out. And ultimately, the players, have to decide if they want to stick around or what they want to do.
Right, and not to mention, the Nationals had one of the worst bullpens. I think they had the worst bullpen in baseball, which is, I thought it was really funny because I didn't think they were gonna. I'm a Nationals fan because I liked Harper coming up and throughout the Nationals, and I'm like, yeah, I like the Nationals. I like what they were doing then. When I saw Harper walk, I'm like, they did the right move, and next thing you know, I'm like coming down to the middle of the season. I'm like, I don't see these guys making it to the playoffs because I just didn't think, because when I think of like playoff baseball, a lot of the teams that are good do have solid bullpens to the extent that they have an arm or like 2 to 3 arms that they can go to. Besides Sean Doolittle, and he was struggling a lot this year too. They didn't have much. It was a lot. They were kind of riding a lot on the arms of Strasburg, Scherzer, and Scherzer, he struggled this year too, and Corbin. So that's why I thought it was so interesting. I'm like, this team had pretty much every odd stacked against them, and not to mention you probably beat the two best teams in the league. You beat the Dodgers, then you had to go take on the Astros, which in my opinion, those two teams are the best in each of the American League and National League. So I'm sitting there like, I have no clue how they did that, but I'm glad they won though, because I am a Nationals fan too. I'm an Indians fan, but Nationals are like my team that if the Indians aren't playing, I'm like, okay, I got these guys going.
Nice. Yeah. That's that just came from Bryce Harper, you're saying, just liking how he played his game and everything.
Well, yeah, because I remember he was a young prospect, being the next superstar, and I was one of those guys that thought he was gonna be better than Trout, but Trout's been a whole other animal in baseball. So I was wrong there, but I saw Juan Soto last year. I'm like, this team has young talent. It's just if they can get enough quality complementary pieces around that young core, they can do a lot of damage. And this year showed that that's all they needed.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Rizzo, the GM, he spent time in the Diamondbacks organization, and when they won that World Series a while back with Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson, and I think trying to get a couple pitchers that just throw heat. But Anibal Sanchez and Corbin, yeah, they both came in clutch, and the bullpen was definitely hard to watch throughout the season at times. But they tried to make a couple moves at the trade deadline. Daniel Hudson was huge for us, and Strickland had some good innings. A lot of the bullpen guys had good innings. It was just the consistency, but ended up not worrying too much about it. I think in the playoffs, you're always putting your top guys forward, and sometimes that's a closer, sometimes that's a starter, and they figured it out, man. Davey Martinez figured out what to do, and Paul Minhart bringing him on as the pitching coach was pretty crucial too.
So if you're Rizzo, are you looking to extend Rendon past like 5 years? Are you like one of those guys that want to keep a guy for a long time, or do you kind of want to get them while they're in their prime and you don't go overdo it like their contract? Because like when you think of like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, their contracts are going to be finishing up when they're in their mid-30s, and they might not be as productive as they are now. So where do you kind of fall on that line?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To be honest, I don't know too much about baseball contracts the same way I could talk about maybe football stuff. But from a fan's perspective, I think he means a lot to the locker room, the clubhouse, and if you look at his defensive efficiency too, he's incredible on defense. I mean, he's going to win some Golden Gloves before his career is over. He's an absolute beast out there, and I think defense is underrated a lot of times in any sport, but in baseball, kind of seems to be forgotten. Not the pitching, but what the fielders are doing and what that does to motivate the offense. I mean, countless times throughout the years and throughout this season, Rendon's made some crucial stops, or Trey Turner's, turned a crazy double play, and then that inning or the next inning, the bats just start flying. I think defense says a lot, and I hope Rendon sticks around. I don't know, man. It's going to be tough, especially with some of their up and coming talent. They have K Boom. I forget his name, but K Boom's like one of their third basemen in their
Yeah,
organization who they like a lot. So
right.
yeah, if I had to guess, they probably wouldn't sign him to a huge yearly thing. But yeah, hopefully they'll extend him.
All right, I do want to ask you about the Cowboys. How do you feel about the Cowboys going into this latter half of the season?
Not great, man. Not gonna lie. They're not looking too good. When you look at our body of work, we've basically beaten all the bad teams and we've lost to all the good teams and the Jets. So that's not great. Um, yeah, I think if you were, a pragmatic Cowboys fan last year, looking at how most of our wins were, it was one of those years where most of our wins were within like a 7 point spread. Like those seasons usually flip the next year. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we finish 8-8 or 9-7. Not to say we won't make the playoffs. I think our division's pretty bad. So, competing with the Eagles at this point, making the playoffs isn't out of the question. But the NFC is just tough this year. Like you look at the West with the Niners and the Seahawks and the Rams. They're not. Their record isn't that great, but they're still the Rams.
And same with
Still
the
have a lot of
Cardinals.
talent.
Cardinals still got 3 wins. I ain't expecting to get 3 wins all year.
That's right. Yeah, they already have a better record than last year with that tie. They can't do worse than last year. So yeah, real surprising. And then the Saints just killing it without Drew Brees. And then the North is looking great. Minus I think the Bears are probably the worst team in the North right now, just with the eye test. And then the South, the Panthers are okay too. But yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm really not a fan of Jason Garrett or Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the GM. I think he's a brilliant owner. And his one flaw as an owner is that he's the GM and he thinks he should be the GM. And as a fan, I just, he fired Jimmy Johnson. He fired Barry Switzer. He fired Bill Parcells. It's not a great track record as an owner to fire those kind of coaches.
Right.
And then sticking with Jason Garrett after he had 3 straight 8-8 seasons. That's like mediocre for 3 years. And this is obviously I'm a fan. I can't critique him too much, but I think the Cowboys need someone who's a little bit stronger willed than Garrett. I think he's a player's coach and does what Jerry Jones tells him to. But I think someone like Chris Richard, their co-defensive coordinator, would be a great replacement to really focus on the defense and be a defensive team and go back to more of like the blue collar Cowboys days and not so much the 90s flashy days,
Right. And are you on the line? Where do you lie on when paying Dak? Are you going more than 20 million, 30 million? I guess, where do you set your sights on? And who would you think would be a good replacement if you don't resign Dak?
Who do I think would be a good replacement? Like another quarterback in the league?
Yeah, if you had a quarterback, or I would say a quarterback that I guess you would be a prospective free agent like Teddy Bridgewater, Cam Newton, guys like that, they might not be on the team where they are right now for next year. And I mean that's what I'm saying. Would you rather pay Dak or would you rather take another quarterback?
I'd rather if those are the two options, I'd rather pay Dak. I mean, he knows the team, he knows the system, the team sees him as a leader. I think that says a lot. He's also like, he might not be the best quarterback, but he's consistent. I actually like him better than Tony Romo. I was never a fan of Romo on the field. I think he's an exceptional commentator. He's probably the most interesting color commentator to listen to on the air, period, of all sports. But as a player, it was just inconsistent. He grew up watching Brett Favre, and that's how he mimicked a lot of his plays, and a lot of that's big risks for potential rewards, but also a lot of blown games that way. And Dak is just consistent. He's consistent in being like a second tier quarterback, but I'd much rather have that and kind of know what we're getting. And if you look at his fourth quarter drives, he's a beast in the fourth quarter with game winning drives. I don't know his numbers off the top of my head, but he's had a ton of fourth quarter comebacks in the 3 or 4 years that he's been quarterback for us. So
So
yeah, I'd rather pay him.
So where are your boundaries in terms of paying him? How much money? Say if he wants like a ridiculous amount of money for like a long term extension, how much money are you saying you can have this but no more?
I think the market has set that. Like, I don't even think in sports today it's necessarily about the talent all the time, especially in the NFL. I think the NFL more than probably basketball maybe or other sports. But yeah, I mean, with Kirk Cousins setting that deal in Minnesota, I think that skews everything. Now, like that's the base in some ways for players.
Right.
So it wouldn't be unreasonable to pay him top dollar and give him a Kirk Cousins like deal. I think, having said that though, like some of this is on Dak too. Like, what are his goals professionally? Does he just want to make a ton of money and be on an incredible franchise in terms of their value, or does he want to win championships? And if you look at the top paid quarterbacks in the league, most of them don't win Super Bowls. And you look at Brady and the Breeze likes, they don't take the top dollar. They take what they think is fair, but they leave some for other talent to come in, and that's like why. If you look at the Patriots, that's what's made them so iconic, and what's made them consistent over 20 years is they spread the money, they spread the wealth, they spread the fame, they spread everything, and they're a team, And I think Dak will have to think of. Honestly, that's something Dak has to think of. He's the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. That's one of the most media focused positions in all of sports, and that's something you have to take into account. I don't think you just think of what's the most I can get here, but he'll have to make his own choices. And I think if it was up to Jerry, he'd pay him the market value probably.
I do want to talk about the Wizards real quick because obviously the NBA season's it just started, so I do want to get your feel on how you feel about the Wizards are doing so far. I know there's not.
So I mentioned that I had season tickets to the Wizards. That's only because I'm in DC. So I'm actually a Spurs fan. My dad's from San Antonio, so I've been a Spurs fan my whole life.
Well, at least you can say that because the Wizards don't have much to cheer about besides Bradley Beal.
Yeah, they're kind of a mess right now. I'm surprised they still have Beal, to be honest. I thought they would have traded him by now to get some draft picks or something out of him, but that could still happen this year.
Right? Yeah, because he's had a strong start, so that they might try and see if they can get top dollar for him and then unload.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense to me given where they're at and where the league's at. The league's stacked teams, and someone's going to want him. Some playoff teams, maybe in the West even. I think there's a lot of teams out West that could have him. The Spurs could take him. I mean, the Spurs, they're Popovich is my favorite coach in all of sports of all time. He's super fundamental and he knows teams. He loves food. I love food. I cook for a living, and so
wow,
yeah,
it's like two peas in a pod.
I think what's that?
2 peas in a pod.
Yeah, yeah. You're a Cavs fan?
Yeah, you know what? I know the record doesn't indicate it, but I think there's a lot of young potential there. I think it's cool because I think people do see that this team does have potential. Sexton and Garland, they're a good duo. Tristan Thompson stepped up his game a little bit. Kevin Love's been doing pretty good. I mean, he's had games where he's going like 20 and 15. So I'm like, okay, I know they paid him all that money last year, and which made no sense whatsoever, but. I know that their defensive efficiency is going to be atrociously bad, but if the team shows signs of light with the new coach and the young talent that's there, I do think there's hope for this team, but it's not going to come right away. The team's never been really good without a guy like LeBron James there. They've never been that good, so they have to figure out a way, or at least Gilbert has to find a way to be like, or the owner like. How can we get this team to be competitive without having a mega superstar? Because that's not going to happen probably ever again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it might be a smart move bringing in John Beilein to do that because, he's a college coach and they're a little bit more used to the Popovich method of making a basketball team and not just a superstar team. So, and the East is wide open too. Like that could work beautifully, having just a team and not a bunch of superstars. So.
Well, I thought it was interesting too because everyone was saying that the Hornets are going to be bad, but they're 4-3 right now, and they're like 4th or 3rd ranked in the East. I'm sitting there like, how? They literally lost Kemba Walker to the Celtics. They took the backup point guard Kyrie Irving from the Celtics, and they're 4-3. Like I mean, everyone was expecting them to be atrocious this year and like bad, and they're 4-3. They probably got it's weird. I know there's 82 games to a season, but it's like things you just don't expect because it's like you just like with the basketball, it's like if you're bad, you're gonna be bad all the way through. It's not like baseball because you can get hot and you might look really good, but then all of a sudden you get on a cold streak and you look like the worst team that anyone's ever seen.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the MLB East, the NL East was like I think they were all like 8-5 at one point. It's hard to tell, where they're going to go, but you're right. In basketball, usually, the Knicks are starting off 0-17, and then that's just where they're going to go.
Right, yeah, that's just the status quo. Then you have to hear Stephen A. Smith, cry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you'd think he'd get over it by now. I think being, doing that for a living makes it tough on him with his team not doing great because, I don't know about you with some of your Cleveland teams, but I just don't have much emotional capacity for the Cowboys anymore. Like, obviously, I love seeing them win, but the threshold for emotion is just kind of tried to keep the standard deviation, like, pretty narrow. Like, I get this much excited when I win and only this much excited when they don't win. And, yeah, if you're a Knicks fan, I feel bad.
I'm trying to numb the pain of being a Browns fan because, like, before this year, everyone was like, "Oh, we're gonna be so good, yeah," and it's like, then you see these first 8 games, and it's like, they are really bad.
How did you feel going into the season? What were your thoughts or anticipations?
Optimist with some pessimism. I was gonna be honest. I was a little skeptical about the Odell trade. Not for the reasons of losing Kevin Zeitler, but bringing in a mega superstar that, the baggage comes with him. I know Odell really has been much of a problem, but I'm thinking of it this way. There's a lot of talent, but in the NFL, talent doesn't win you championships. That's just kind of how it is. When you look at the teams that are successful, they're just good, fundamentally sound teams that don't commit penalties. They don't commit turnovers. And what have the Browns done every game, every week? They're like first in the league in penalties. They turn the ball over way too many times, and there's no passion on the field. The coaching staff, and if you think about the coaching staff's brand new from last year, so all the chemistry you had from last year is completely gone, and everything looks completely different from last year because you totally forgot to maintain what was working. If the shoe fits, let it be. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting to me about the NFL is you've seen the Patriots win the way they have over 20 years. And I'm not saying everyone should copy them. I think a lot of teams have tried and failed to copy them. But the moral of that story is like they've identified what works for them and they've like actually created a system that works in the long term.
Exactly.
And committed to it. And that is they've made something sustainable and like everyone. That's what any good organization does, whether it be sports or business or otherwise.
No, you're completely right.
Yeah, you have to have the culture and the systems and the processes that kind of allow you to plug any piece into that puzzle and then make it work, And all these other teams, the Cowboys, the Browns, they're trying to do, a lot of times it's like a short fix. I think John Dorsey, I think he's a good GM, and I think the Cowboys are in a better place than they've been in years past. But it's still like, it takes a while to build up that culture and the process. But I was rooting for the Browns, man. I really will. After the Hard Knocks appearance, I became a fan. And like I said, I have an NFL Sunday ticket, and they were one of the teams I watched every game of last year. And so, yeah, I would love to see them do well.
That's what I said, because like last year, the last 8 games after they fired Hugh Jackson, and you saw this team play, there was a fire under them that they wanted to prove themselves. This year, I don't see that. I feel like they get that notion that like they've proven something because they have all this talent, when in reality that doesn't happen. You can't win when you're playing like they have, and that's the problem. I want to see this team that has a fire under the butt to succeed, to want to win, and I don't see that from the coaching staff. I don't see that from anybody. It's just, oh, we'll try next week. Oh, we got to do better. Like, to me, if you really truly love the game, you're going to recognize the problem. And I'm sure they recognize those problems in the locker room, but it's like you want to see more on the field because you see these guys every Sunday and they're doing the same stuff and it's just not working.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, especially as professional athletes, they have to have the fire underneath them because they're getting paid tons of money. They're elite in a lot of ways. You have to somehow create that fire, and that's what Belichick does better than anyone else in all of sports. Is anytime anyone talks bad about them, the Patriots, or says they're going to win, he posts that stuff in the locker room. He pastes it on everyone's locker. He tells them about it. He's constantly telling them that they're the underdog, even though they're not. They've never been the underdog, but he's just really good with psychologically creating this need to win and prove yourself as for them 6-time Super Bowl champion. Honestly, I'll bring it back to baseball for a second. I wasn't when the Nats were up 2-0, I was thinking, all right, like I hope they don't lose their fire because they played all year with the fire under them, and that's what helps them win. And I felt a little more comfortable when we were down 2-3. I was like, all right, well now they have something to play for. And this sounds crazy, but like if you watched them all season, you'd know that was the feeling. Every game, there was a game against the Mets in it was like early September. It was around Labor Day, and they were down 7 runs in the 9th inning, and a lot of people had left the game. It was a big series because it was against the Mets, in the playoff race still. And I just had a feel. I was like, they're not out. They've been fighting all year. And sure enough, they scored 7 runs in the bottom of the 9th, and Suzuki had a walk-off homer. And anyway, that's like just a summary of the fire they needed. Is they played so well when they were down, and the series was the same thing. And I think you're totally right. The Browns, like, what fire do they have now? Because now it's like it's almost just chaos. Like, it's one thing to have fire because you're losing, but for them, it's like they had such high expectations, or they thought they had proven themselves last year. And this year, it just seems like it's a lot about personal brands and, like, where's the team now? Like, does it, for you as a fan, does it feel like that they have this team chemistry, or, like, what's the general feeling? How do you think they're going to get back?
In my opinion, what needs to happen is, I know I was kind of skeptical about Freddie because I personally love the attitude of Greg Williams. Granted, his defensive rankings were like dead last in the league in terms of yards allowed, everything else. But in my defense, or in his defense, the Browns created turnovers. They were one of the top turnover teams in the league last year. And B, they were aggressive. I know, everyone had said after he left that, everyone was kind of dogging him. Miles only had 2 moves. Demarius Randall said, yeah, I would have been traded if he stayed as the head coach. But it's like, the team played. The team showed up those last 8 games. Even when they lost, they looked competitive doing it. They didn't look inept. Like, right now, the Browns can look completely inept at every facet of the game besides special teams. And it was kind of funny because the Browns special teams were the only 2 glaring hole, or I'd say the kicking position, because last year that was such a problem. And now this year, everyone was like, oh, we got a full team except the kicker. And now Austin Seibert's been doing great as a rookie. And it's like, it's just funny how the tables have turned because everyone was expecting a kicking problem, but in reality, this is just kind of the Browns of old, where we had Phil Dawson for so many years, always produce, and that's what Seibert's been doing. But to your question, for the Browns, I think they need to run the ball more. Since they got Kareem Hunt coming back, I think you run the ball a lot more, give your offensive linemen some momentum. Then you run play action and give your ball you just throw the deep balls, quick throws to Odell and Jarvis. Get Rashard Higgins in the passing game. Defense, I don't know. They better figure out something because this nickel defense, and they're not stopping the run worth anything. They can't tackle. They're putting themselves in mismatches. And what I don't understand is like the game against Seattle, the Browns did not spy Russell Wilson the entire time, and he drove the Seahawks down, backwards, forwards, side to side, however he wanted. Like, to me, and especially in football, you have to adjust. If you don't adjust, you're just going to get picked apart. Especially like guys in Russell Wilson who they know the game, they have a feel for the game, and they will beat you 9 times out of 10 if you're not ready for it. That's the problem. And if they don't, if they just adjust, they'll be fine. They don't adjust at all from game to game, halftime to the second half. They don't do anything, and that's their problem. They just keep the same thing. Like, it's the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. That's exactly what they're doing, and they're getting the same result.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's one thing I do respect about the Cowboys right now is they're really good at their halftime adjustments, especially, but they seem to adjust from game to game. But uh, I'm with you on Greg Williams. Like, I think he has a lot of attitude, and that's good for a team, and seemed like the right fit for the Browns, like with the team that they had last year.
And that's
Kind
why,
of surprised they
yeah,
let him go.
and that's what I said. Like, I felt like the Browns needed a guy like that because I feel like the Browns were kind of like they're like the punching bag. Like they're the victim. They're the victim. They've always been treated as the victim since they've come back. They've always been awful. Then Williams is kind of like the, screw that. I'm just gonna punch you in the mouth multiple times, and we're gonna win however we do it. And that's what I thought that team had, and this is what the team is missing.
Kind of what we're talking about the Patriots. Like the Patriots know their formula for success, and that is kind of regardless of the players. But the Browns kind of, I think, the move with Kitchen, catering to Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb and like a young offensive talent, mostly Baker Mayfield, like catering to young quarterback that you have a lot of money in, as opposed to what's best for our team right now, right? Like Belichick he's not an offensive guy.
No,
But
his mentor was Bill Parcells when he was what was he defensive coach for? He was a defensive coach for the Giants when Lawrence Taylor was in New York.
yeah, I mean, he's the defensive guru, and he leaves the offensive stuff to his coordinator, McDaniel. McDaniels has been there the whole time that Brady's been there with all the Super Bowls. And, that, like, they don't cater to Brady. Kraft isn't hiring a coach to make Brady happy. Like, I think the Browns need to figure out their identity. And to me, and it sounds like to you, like, they're want to be the guys punching them in the mouths and kind of change the narrative, but they're somehow, like, just so focused on their offense and doing something there, but they don't have an offensive line. So like they're just all over the place, like the defense has some holes, but I think that would be in that division too, especially like look at the division just traditionally, maybe not this year, but the Ravens and the Steelers usually have impeccable defenses. And moving forward, the Browns are going to have a great defense if they're going to stop Lamar Jackson. So you have to look at that, I think, first and foremost.
And when you say stop Lamar Jackson, that's exactly what they did when they beat the Ravens 40-24. Then the next thing you know, I'm like, I'm sitting here.
Last season?
No, this season, the Browns beat the Ravens like 40-24. Then every other game, they haven't done anything on offense. And what confuses me is that the Browns beat the Ravens like single-handedly. Like Ravens really were not in the game for most of the time. At Baltimore, not to mention. And next thing you know, I'm watching the same team play New England, and I'm like, this isn't even a football team. Then the Ravens play New England, and next thing you know, the Ravens they're dominating the Patriots. And I'm sitting here like, what is going on? This makes no sense.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the weird things with divisional sports in the NFL. Like, your division opponents can beat you at any time because they have, if nothing else, like that's what they're fighting for if they're a bad team. But they've also seen you so many times, and anything could, like the Dolphins. How many times have they beat the Patriots over the? Hasn't been a lot, but they've had some games that they've won against the Pats that just make no sense.
Yeah, like the Miami Miracle, was that what they called that last year?
Yeah, the Miami Miracle last year.
Yeah.
And, they've won some others throughout the years too.
Right.
And the Jets and the Bills, like they've beaten the Patriots too. It's not crazy for them to beat the Patriots, but yeah, I don't know if it's like the game planning where it's more familiar, and so the favorite is like, we've done this before, or if it's the underdog too, just wanting to beat their division opponents. But yeah, it shows though that the Browns have the capacity, and that's to me what is so cool about football or NFL football is any team could win at any time, and it's you're never going to really be surprised. Like when the Chargers beat the Packers, that's not out of the question just because the records are bad. But look at the teams last year; it's completely flipped. The Packers were awful and the Chargers were a playoff team, so it's never out of the question for any team. That's why you can't sleep on them. When the Cowboys lost to the Jets, totally embarrassing. Like, what are the Cowboys doing? They're just thinking because the Jets hadn't won that they're going to breeze through it. Like, what's the mentality there in the locker room that lets that happen on the field? Again, it's like critiquing these professional athletes from our couches, but from an organizational standing, like you have to respect every opponent you're going to play, and the best coaches like Belichick understand that for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's going to do it for this episode of Sports Avenue. I just want to say, Carson, thank you for joining the show. It's been a pleasure talking football, baseball, and everything else in between with you. Also, you're a lot of, you can plug in all social media right now.
Sure, man. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm at Carson Sweezy on Instagram and Twitter, but Instagram is where I spend most of my time. CarsonSweezy. I share a lot of food recipes and cooking tips, so check it out.
Yeah. Also, you said you have a podcast, so why don't you tell everyone else where you can listen to your podcast?
True. Yeah, I host the More Beach Meetings podcast. So it's all about company culture and the future of work and team building. So that's on Apple. It's on Spotify, SoundCloud, Lisbon, wherever you get your podcast. More Beach Meetings podcast.
All right, sounds good. So that's going to conclude the 40th episode of Sports Avenue with Jimmy. I'm Jimmy Simonis. I was joined with Carson Sweezy. We talked pretty much every sport under the sun possible today. Carson, again, thank you for joining. Everyone, have a great day. Have a great week. And don't forget, the road for sports starts here on Sports Avenue. Everyone, take care.